Hello everyone, my name is Rajiv and welcome to part 2 of our Decoding Customer Success series. In our first part, we spoke about the fundamentals of customer success. Today I'm going to be talking about something that comes after the fundamentals are established, and that is how do you onboard your existing customers once they make a purchase of a subscription or software. So today is going to be all about onboarding. So without further delay, let's move right into it. So first things first. So first things first, why is onboarding important? And that's a very good question. Why should you bother to onboard your customers once they purchase your subscription? As far as you're concerned, you've got the money, everything is good. So why bother with onboarding? So let's start with the first point. Onboarding helps the customer start using a product, and this shows the value of a product. So imagine that you've got a really large product that's got some really good features in it, some really good value props that you can share with the customer. But that's pretty pointless if the customer can't discover those features or he doesn't really see the value because it's so complicated or so large. You have to understand that not all software is designed to be easy to use, so as to say. So you have to make sure that there's a certain amount of investment going in from your side as a SaaS owner or as a customer success manager to make sure that once your customer has made a purchase, he then understands the true value of that product. And that's where onboarding comes in. So when a customer comes in raw, we'll discuss the entire process, of course, in length. It really helps if you onboard the customer correctly. Similarly, onboarding ensures that your customer is making the most of a solution, like I just mentioned, and this increases the stickiness of the solution. What do I mean by the stickiness of the solution? The more the customer uses a solution, the more reliant he becomes on a solution, the harder it is for him to move away from that solution, as well as the harder it is for him to actually leave the solution or even if he's offered a better option. Why? Because it's actually sticky. The company starts relying on the solution and making a change becomes difficult. And that's why onboarding is very important. Because one of the fundamentals of onboarding, if you're doing onboarding right, is to make sure that the adoption of the product is increased throughout the organization once the purchase is made. Of course, onboarding helps negate a lot of possible blockers and potential support workload that might arise due to lack of customer education. And this is very important. You may even have the best support team in the world. Why do you want to increase their workload? Not to mention, every time a customer who just purchased a software has to go to the support team for a query, no matter how good they are, the experience is degrading every time he's reaching out to support to get those queries answered. So that's why, as I mentioned earlier, some companies have an account manager and a solution engineer that goes in the onboarding process, or they have a customer success manager who does both, or they have a customer success manager and a solution engineer. So basically, the point is to make sure that you are proactive in answering those customer queries and making sure that the customer doesn't have to keep coming back to you again and again. There's minimal back and forth. So there's a lot of proactiveness involved in the whole process. And the final thing is, of course, entire onboarding process, if you're doing everything right, it definitely helps build a positive customer experience. So if you remember in the last video, we talked about the NPS and how important the NPS is. But one of the things that is absolutely going to make sure that your NPS score is good is if the onboarding experience is quick, the onboarding is relevant, and the customer actually sees the value of the product in action post the onboarding being finished. So that's the basic reason why anyone should invest in onboarding. Now let's talk about how you should go on about doing onboarding. So the first step in the onboarding process is essentially establishing goals. Now, what do I mean by goals? These are not your goals. These are your customers' goals. And of course, the goals have to be defined before you start the onboarding process. A product can mean different things to different companies. So if you have a product, for example, a communication tool like Slack or Flock, if you have a software that is designed for just communication purpose, an engineering team is going to use that tool differently and have different set of goals for it, whereas maybe an accounts team will have a different set of goals for it, and HR will use it differently. So it is important that you understand before what your customers' goals are. Now, if you've done a good job of selling the product, you probably have those goals already in hand, in which case you just put those goals together, take them to the customer and says, okay, this is the listed goals that we have. How many of these goals are immediately you're looking to get done, and how many would you like to take longer for? So you have to attack the low-hanging fruit first. More importantly, you have to establish something called milestones to frequently check progress on the goals. Now, what is a milestone? Let's take an example, which I will be taking in depth. Let's say that you've got a communication tool. Again, let's take that example. You've got a communication tool in place. One milestone in the onboarding process could be making sure that an entire team logs into the tool for the first time and they start using the tool. Now, that's a milestone. That's not the goal. It's a milestone that tells you you are moving positively towards your goal. Now, the idea is you could have these milestones external facing, which basically means you can share them with the customer and saying, hey, they're doing really well. This is the milestone we met today. In addition, you should have internal milestones that you might not want to share with the customer straight away because he may not see the value in them, but you understand that meeting those milestones will improve the stickiness of the solution and create a positive impact. We'll talk about this further when I go through an example. And of course, then put everything down in an onboarding schedule. I will be building a template for the onboarding schedule as well and share it in my future blog posts. If you want to know when my blogs are, there on insideselling.org/blog. A lot of good articles. I'll be adding this to that as well. And then you get the customer's approval on the onboarding plan. Now, it might sound very obvious to get the customer's approval, but you'll be surprised how many times when you start building an onboarding plan and you share it with the customer actually may come back to you and say, hey, I'm not really interested in that right now. Let's try this. So very important for both parties to make an agreement and understand the direction they want to go in. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you have to have an internal onboarding plan that centers around organization-specific goals. Now, these are not the customer's organization. These are your organization's goals. Now, there is nothing villainous about what you're trying to do here. No covert secret ops stuff here. It's just basically you making sure that you have an internal process that you also follow, because when we discuss this further, I'll show you how you can have your set of goals and the customer's goals and the signing off of both when you as an organization sign off on your internal goals as well as on the customer's goals. That's when true onboarding is finished. Let's move on. Now let's talk about milestones in a little more detail. So I mentioned what milestones do. So you cannot achieve goals without having markers in place to check progress. And these markers, as I mentioned, are called the milestones. If you don't have a customer success software right now and you're relying on something like plain old simple Salesforce to get it done, you're not going to be achieving much. And all the talk that I'm having here probably is not going to cut it. You have to have a customer success software that has the capability to track both these goals as well as the milestones. There has to be specific markers in place that you can customize and say, okay, these are the milestones and these are the goals, and your software should be able to track it. You have to work with the customer to meet these milestones and goals. And of course, when I use the word deadlines, you have to make it time bound. And there is no such thing as an unlimited time period for onboarding. And like I keep saying, if your onboarding is taking too long, you're already behind the 8 ball, because a lengthy onboarding is one of the biggest walkaway points or the biggest churn reasons for customers, because they eventually just stop using the product because it's taking so long. So let's move on to the final thing, which of course I mentioned earlier. You should get a customer sign off when onboarding finishes. Just because you've done all the goals and you say, okay, fine, we're done with the onboarding, great. No need to ask the customer because obviously we agreed on those goals up front. That's not how it works. You have to get the customer sign off once the onboarding finishes. And like I mentioned earlier, your customer success software should also sign off on the onboarding when the onboarding is complete. So your software, the internal organization goals that I keep talking about, those have to be met as well. And finally, onboarding is only finished when both internal and external onboarding finishes. So I'm going to talk about this in an example to just show you how this works. So let's shoot into the example. So let's say that there's a graphic design software that your sales team just sold, or you as an account executive just sold, and you've agreed with the customer that you need to get the team to start using the product in the first 15 days so that they can appreciate how good the product is. So on the top in green are the milestones that you will have with the customer, and in blue are your internal organization specific milestones that you want to have essentially to make sure that you're doing everything right by your organization as well as your customer. So day one, the first goal is I'm going to have introductory training with the team and tell them about the software and show them all the great features. Now, an internal goal, as you can see, is in this graphic design software example, I've thought of a feature that actually allows the entire graphic design team to work as a collaborative organization and work on graphics, etc. So you want to talk about that great feature called the collaborate feature. to the customer. Of course, we'll be talking about everything with the customer, features and values, but you want to highlight the collaborate feature. So now that's an internal organizational goal. Why? Because your research has shown that customers, once they start using the collaborate feature, their churn is low and they actually see instant value in the product. So that's day one. Some days down the line, you then line up another set of training, which is hands-on on the software usage, where you essentially say, okay, I want everyone here to start using the software. I'm available for any question answer session that you have, and we'll take it from there. Again, you're being proactive. You're not just monitoring the customer's progress, but you're making sure that there's a milestone in place where you actually go back to them, set up a planned meeting and say, okay, any questions? If not, here, let me show you a couple of really good things that will get you going faster on the software. Now, another customer first facing goal, a milestone here, which is you have to build their first graphic, which is a shared graphic, or if not a shared graphic, but just build their first graphic using the software. Again, this can be shared with the customer and he can agree saying, fine, yeah, I think 3 days of training is good enough for us. We should be able to ready to go by the 3 days. Now remember, when you agree on this, the gun is not on the customer's head, it's actually on your head as well. Because if the customer is willing and you're not able to deliver on this, the experience is going to be bad. So therefore, the goals should be realistic, not just for your customer, but for yourself also. Now, there's an internal goal, which is, again, around that collaborate feature, which is make sure that 90% of usage is happening on that collaborate feature. So if there's 10 users and they're using the product for at least an hour a day, and they're using all the different features, you want at least 9 of them to have used that collaborate feature in that day. So that is an internal goal. You won't want to share that with the customer because obviously you don't want to push him towards overtly towards a collaborate feature. You can drop hints on the collaborate feature, show him how great it is again, but that's it. This is an internal goal. There's nothing to hide about it again. There's nothing villainous about this. It's just that you're measuring your progress internally as well as in terms of the customer's expectations. You go along. Finally, they love the collaborate feature and you've set a milestone where you say, okay, this is the day when the team will build its first collaborative graphic. And that milestone hits. At the same time, you want to collect feedback on the onboarding saying, hey, you actually hit the really gold standard, which is using the collaborate feature, and it's going to tell you, do a lot of good stuff for you. How is that working out for you? You collect feedback on that as well. Again, once that feedback is done, you then analyze the usage of the software to make sure that 80% of the team is using the software. Why does it matter? Well, basically, you could have done a great job, but if only 2 out of 10 people who were supposed to use the software are using the software, that should set alarm bells off because clearly they're not seeing the value and not everyone is using the software. One of the biggest reasons for churn and something that people fail to follow over a period of time is a dip in the number of users that are using the software as well as a dip in the usage of the software. So immediately during the onboarding, you need to get to this internal milestone to make sure that 80% of the team is not using the software. Now, again, you can share this with the customer, but if not, you can always go back to the customer and say, hey, I noticed that only 5 of you guys are actually using the software. You've got licenses for 10. Any particular reason why you're not using the remaining 5 licenses? Get a conversation going because this internal milestone will make sure that, you don't leave it open to churn or you don't have the customer does not end up using the software completely as it should. And of course, then on day 15, when you've done all the hard work, you get a sign up from the customer and internal, you get a sign up from your software or from your customer success manager saying the onboarding is finished. It doesn't have to be a British style document or etc. Just a nod and an agreement from the customer as well as the software. So now if you look at the graphic as a whole, you can see that clearly you've got internal goals and you've got external goals as well. Very important to repeat again, you have to have the software that allow you to support this. If not, you're actually blindsided and you may end up not meeting your onboarding goals, or even if you do onboard customers, you leave a lot open to interpretation or a lot open to chance, and that's what you don't want. You want to make sure that you're hitting all those goals on time, making sure those milestones are met and the customer is onboarded. And once the customer is truly onboarded, we'll go to the final part of these customer success videos, which is what happens when a customer is onboarded. Do you stop talking to them and say, okay, thank you so much, my job is done? Or how do you continue to deliver value to them? And how do you continue to nurture them, so as to say? So we'll be talking about nurturing in our final video. And remember, if you want to get in touch with us, you can always subscribe to our channel and subscribe to this video for any updates. And of course, we are available on Twitter at Insight Selling. On our website, it's insightselling.org. And of course, we're on Facebook with facebook.com/insightselling. Thank you so much for listening. Please do keep sharing the feedback. I did get feedback from a few people on LinkedIn as well as on our website. So please keep that feedback coming, and we hope to have more quality content sent your way. So this is Rajiv signing off for now and working on video 3 as we speak. Bye.